Hi, I'm Emily Cox, and I'm here to talk about Vlad III Draculae. His name literally meaning a medieval prince with a figurative thirst for blood, which he certainly lived up to. Vlad the Impaler was maybe not exactly what Machiavelli would have looked for, but he was pretty close. For one, he was very cunning. Most people think that Vlad was overly cruel, but I think that his impalings that most people talk about were justified. They weren't just a sadistic way of getting rid of his opponents. They were a way to intimidate and scare his bigger opponents away from him. For example, in 1462, Mehmed II invaded the kingdom of Wallachia, which Vlad was the prince of at the time. But when he got to the capital city, instead of finding Vlad and his army, he found it deserted, which makes people question, what was Vlad doing? But instead of finding Vlad's guards, he also found the rotting remains of Mehmet's own men, who were prisoners of war at the time, each impaled on their own spike. And this event stopped Mehmet from pursuing Vlad any further than he needed to. Another example of how cunning he was when he tried to kill Mehmet. He dressed his own men in Ottoman soldiers' garments and to go kill Mehmet, which ultimately failed, but was successful in making the Ottoman soldiers turn on themselves and slaughter their own men without killing any of Vlad's own soldiers. And Vlad the Impaler may have been a cunning fox, but he lacked one of Machiavelli's main points, which was that you should also be a very strong lion. And one thing that Vlad didn't have that was a trait of the lion was a big enough army to fight those big wars. Vlad appeared to be a strong lion by defeating kingdoms by these simple tricks, but those were all traits of a fox. And mixing the lion was one of the reasons that he eventually failed in which ultimately failed because he didn't have armies big enough to fight those large kingdoms. And while you might have thought that Vlad was actually ruling with a fist made out of blood, spears, and whips, in all actuality, he was doing what was necessary to fight a military force much, much greater than his own, and still protected his own people, which to me is pretty Machiavellian. I'm Emily Cox, and that was Vlad III Draculae.